It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On Auburn podcast, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. Brought to you by Fetch Me Home Delivery. Use promo code FetchMe20 for your first delivery free. Don't leave your house tonight. Just go home. Go home. Don't even worry about dinner. Let Fetch Me take care of it. Great service. Best service in town. And if you're looking to have your family meal delivered in 40 minutes or less, the food will still be warm by the time you order it. That's what I absolutely love about it. You don't have to reheat anything or even worry about it because they take care of that. They also handle your dry cleaning, coffee, groceries, you name it. They probably deliver it to you. So be sure to check that out, fetchmedelivery.com, or use the free Fetch Me app and use promo code FetchMe20 for your first delivery free. Fun show lined up today. Zach Blackerby, Michael Papp is here with you. In a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama, kind of give perspective of the other side of things. Alabama folks, they're hurting, man.
Yeah, this was a cool interview, a cool conversation because, you get to peek into, really how Alabama feels after a loss, just period, because it doesn't happen very often. And obviously you get to see on social media and stuff the real crazy Alabama people that do crazy stuff and it gets recorded. Mm-hmm. Or the people calling for Nick Saban's head, which is
wild,
dumb. And, so it's good to kind of get someone to give us some insight on real people.
Yeah, so we'll chat with him in just a second. There's two big bits of news that I want to get to before that. So first off, really right after we got done recording yesterday, but Lee Hunter, 5-star defensive tackle, class of 2021. Yeah, 5-star defensive tackle. He commits to Auburn. He chose Auburn over Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, several other programs, and he's one of the best defensive tackles in the country. And that is that's going to be big. That's going to be big. Rodney Garner does it again.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Reload. Don't rebuild.
Yeah. So it's going to take some time for him to kind of get in and all that. So 2021 class, but that's exciting. And then another thing on the recruiting front, Tank Bigsby, Auburn's running back commit. He got his 5th star yesterday, according to the 247 Sports Composite. So that is Auburn kind of got 2 5-stars yesterday in a weird way. So that's pretty big. That's pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah. That's okay, I guess.
Okay, I guess. All right. So in just a moment, Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama will join us. Stay tuned.
Your team.
Greetings, 12 Locked On Seahawks podcast.
Who dat family, and welcome into this week's Locked On Saints.
Hello to all you Foxborough faithful, Locked On Patriots.
Every day.
Another Victory Monday.
It's officially Throwback Tuesday.
Crossover Wednesday episode.
Thursday Night Football.
It is Red Friday edition.
When it comes to the biggest stories.
And so the Chiefs news story of today is, unfortunately, at this point in the season, it is continuing to be injuries.
You need to be Locked On.
We've touched about it on this show and all over Twitter and all that.
And all of a sudden we have a great football team with a championship defense, a franchise quarterback, a running game that can't be stopped. This is exactly why we watch football.
Good quarterbacks are maximized in good systems. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers this season.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Apple Podcast app.
Google Podcasts.
Spotify.
Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your team.
Okay, let's get it. Locked On LSU, your team every day.
Welcome back in to Locked On Bama.
You're going to hear about it all week long on Locked On Buckeyes.
Every day.
Monday through Friday.
When it comes to the biggest stories.
Everybody's talking, and we're not excluded from the mix.
Everything that you could want from a post-game recap, we're going to do.
They're far and away the number one team in the country. Winning at this point is the only thing that matters. It's going to put you in meaningful games later.
You need to be Locked On.
Tua is the best of us. He is an incredible kid, immensely talented, and it's such a shame that his fairy tale ending was actually at the beginning.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Apple Podcast app.
Google Podcasts.
Spotify.
Hit us up with those 5 stars, and we're going to be here 5 days a week. 1 star for every day of the week.
Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If you want to hear more shows like this, well, just go to LockedOnPodcasts.com.
If your company is interested in advertising and marketing to men between the ages of 18 and 44, your company should be sponsoring this podcast. Locked On Auburn is listened to by 98% men and 80% between the ages of 18 to 44. So if you want to advertise to male listeners between 18 and 44, this is your chance. Plus, our rates are pretty reasonable. Email me at lockedonauburn@gmail.com to get more information. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Auburn. Zach Blackerby and Michael Papp is here with you. Now doing something a little different, a crossover episode. Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama. Luke, how you doing, man?
I'll be honest with you. I've had better days.
Yeah. I mean, Saturday was one of the craziest games that we could recall. And then, the fact that you put it in an Iron Bowl just kind of puts the cherry on top. I mean, what's the Alabama perspective on all of this?
Well, I have a different Alabama perspective than most because I'm from Alexander City. That's where I do my podcast. My co-host, Jimmy Stein, who's somewhat of an Alabama internet legend, he's down in Mobile. And, of course, my being in Alexander City, I'm right next to Auburn. And my mom actually graduated from Auburn, but still a big Alabama fan. And,
sure,
went through all the school system here, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've been sort of like the lone wolf Alabama fan in this community. And so this game's always meant more to me personally. But I think most people's perspective has been, okay, we kind of screwed this up. And, a lot of people have wanted to say, shouldn't have gotten that extra second back or allowed Auburn to set up, and they did this, and we shouldn't have done that. And, I'm kind of just, hey, guys, we lost. And I've always been, you're going to get bad calls sometimes. You're going to get, Derek Brown got held a lot in the LSU game, and it didn't get called. Mm-hmm. And I was telling Auburn fans then, hey, deal with it. I mean, sometimes you don't get the call. Sometimes it's your turn over the barrel. And the other thing is, Bo Nix, who I've covered for a long time now with the AHSA Radio Network.
Sure.
He's just a guy that's not going to make a lot of mistakes. I mean, yeah, they called him Bo Picks a few times earlier this year, but he is a true freshman, so let's give him a break. He made fewer mistakes, and Auburn's defense was opportunistic when Alabama had their miscues.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, I still cannot explain for the life of me why it is that when Alabama goes to Jordan-Hare, it is like playing on an ancient Indian burial ground. I don't understand why we hit goalposts or miss chip shot field goals or give kick sixes or, Jimmy and I were laughing because if Najee Harris wasn't such a statuesque Adonis and had a pretty nice physique, that football doesn't bounce off his backside and into the hands of Kobe McLean. If that's me, that ball falls right down.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's just weird.
It's like hitting a rock.
Yeah. Weird things happen, and it's part of the game. And, if I weren't an Alabama fan, I would say that was one of the more incredible games I've ever been to, and I was there.
Mm-hmm.
But I am an Alabama fan, and it's one of the more painful losses I've experienced. But I will say this, the only positive out of all this is that I'm more convinced than ever that this team would have been waxed by Ohio State had they made the playoffs.
This is Vinny Iyer, host of Locked On Fantasy Football with your Locked On Fantasy Football Edge of the Day. The 2019 NFL season has been full of surprises for fantasy football, and none has been bigger of late than what Ryan Fitzpatrick is doing while locked into the Dolphins offense. He delivered another 3-touchdown game against the Eagles in Week 13 with new go-to guy Devontae Parker having his most dominant game yet. The fun can continue for Fitzpatrick as a hot streamer with matchups against the Jets, Giants, and Bengals in a row during the fantasy football playoffs. If you're playing DFS, Fitzpatrick and Parker is a hot stack you can target over the next 3 weeks before the rematch with the Patriots in Week 17. Get the edge in your fantasy football league every day by listening to Locked On Fantasy Football on your preferred podcast provider.
Yeah. I mean, for whatever reason it is, and I'm sure you have a better answer to this than I do, Luke. But the Alabama defense, I mean, they've given up points to a lot of folks this year, but I didn't expect them to give up almost 50 points to Auburn on Saturday. I mean, what's the issue here? Is it going to get fixed this offseason? I mean, what do you think that looks like?
I mean, the issue is Dylan Moses. It starts and ends there. I mean, Alabama needed a leader, and that's one thing Alabama did not have on this team all year long. And I don't mean that as an insult for anybody on the squad, but in the past, Alabama's always had a Rolando McClain, a Dante Hightower, a C.J. Mosley, and noticing a trend here, those guys are all linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama was dealing with a lot of injuries, which is part of the game. You got to deal with it. It was an inordinate amount of injuries this year. And it was also to people that we could ill afford to lose, even with a team stacked full of NFL talent. Jimmy and I on the podcast this summer said, okay, who are the guys, you always worry about somebody getting hurt. Who are the guys we can't lose?
Sure.
Well, we cannot lose Tua, and we cannot lose Dylan Moses. And we lose Dylan Moses before game one. And his absence was felt all throughout the year. And yes, by the time you get to the Iron Bowl, you're not really a true freshman anymore. But there's no doubt in my mind, Christian Harris and Shane Lee are going to be good, but they needed to be backups this year. They didn't need to be in the roles they were in.
Yeah.
And it especially in Alabama's defense, it can get quite complicated. And I think that they were in over their head for most of the season.
The thoughts on Tua, being irreplaceable. I mean, his backup looked pretty stinking impressive on Saturday. I mean, Mac Jones was able to do whatever he wanted.
Mac Jones is a very confident, good player. And I think that Tua gets – some people like to take shots at Tua in terms of, well, it's his receivers making him look good. I really believe that if Tua's in that game, Alabama wins because I don't think they're 2 pick sixes. But Tua's a one-of-a-kind talent. And to say Mac is not Tua is not an insult to Mac because Alabama's never had a quarterback like Tua before ever. And I've been following Alabama since, the day I was born.
Sure.
So I think that Mac is good. I think he's fine. But I'll also say this, and based on Tua's latest interview with both Kirk Herbstreit and Cecil Hurt, Tua is genuinely considering coming back, which, based on a mock draft I looked at from CBS this morning, makes some sense because they don't have him in the first round anymore. So it's not out of the question that he comes back. But if he were to come back, all of a sudden Alabama has Tua. They have Bryce Young, who some people consider the number one quarterback in the country out of California. And then they'll have Mac Jones, and they'll have Talia Tagovailoa, and they'll also have Paul Tyson, who is Bear Bryant's grandson. So, you've got a bunch of or great-grandson, you've got a bunch of quarterbacks, and I feel like of all those 5, Mac Jones would probably be the one, if that's the scenario that wound up playing out, that he'd be the one to transfer. And this is where, I think it would be good for him because he did show out against a fantastic defense, and he played really, really well. The 2 pick sixes notwithstanding, one of them definitely his fault. Another one was a missed block by Ali Cahoe, and then just a random luck of the bounce of the football that ended up in Jacoby McClain's hands.
Sure. So the way this Iron Bowl played out, I mean, every Iron Bowl especially, with this magnitude, when it has that, that level of excitement, it goes down to the very end. There's always these plays that kind of live on in the history of this game. And there's been a ton of them for both sides. What do you think the ones from Saturday, what's the play that's going to stand out, do you think, when we're talking about this game 5-6 years from now, because it's an Iron Bowl, so we will be doing that. Which plays do you think are going to kind of solidify themselves in Iron Bowl lore for both sides?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And these always tend to happen in Jordan-Hare, too.
That's
think
true.
About, look, I laugh with some of my other cohorts and say, whenever Alabama and Auburn play in Tuscaloosa, for the most part, the comeback notwithstanding,
right?
It seems like something like the Alabama was up 42-0 at the half in 2012, but and so that game was not even really enjoyable. Or last year's game where Tua was just passing it all over the place and they counted for 6 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. There's no name you can give that game. There's nothing you can say about it. But, now you've got the cam back, the kick six, really, I guess, the kick ass in 2017.
Yeah.
And now you've got this one, which you can call it the doink or the unfair at Jordan Hare or the, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. It hadn't really worked itself out yet. Whatever the
No, but it's getting there.
It's getting there.
There'll be a hashtag. Don't worry.
Yeah. The doink I'm seeing a lot, but I don't like that. I think folks are more creative than that, but maybe they're not. I don't know.
A lot of times, it's the headline the next day, and I don't know what the headline was in Tuscaloosa, but here the OA News just went with instant classic.
What a bummer headline. They missed the mark on that one.
Oh, they did. Yeah, that's pretty cliche.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I guess for me, it is going to be the doink. And again, being at the game, and I'm about 47 years old, so I am 47.
I was about to say, what does about mean there?
But I hate to say, look, when you get this age, you sort of start trying to cheat.
Yeah,
but,
I gotcha.
So I was in the upper deck. I was on the 50. I had great seats.
Yeah.
And so when they were lining up for the kick, I have to depend on the crowd noise and crowd reaction to determine if the kick is good. I can see enough to see the motion of the kick, but I can't watch the ball.
Right.
And this is what will stick with me forever, that even before I heard the roar of the crowd indicating a miss, the sound of the football hitting the goalpost reverberated through time for me. It was as if I had earphones on and the microphone was glued to the goalpost.
Yeah.
Because it just this reverberation just went on, and all I could think was, oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't believe
it
this has happened again.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, from the Auburn side of it, I mean, I think Zacoby McClain's anytime you have a 100-yard pick six and an iron ball, similar to Amari Cooper's, 99-yard catch, a few years ago. I think those are going to be ones that live on. And then the picture of little old Sean Shivers, running through the Alabama defense to score the go-ahead touchdown. I think that one's going to be around for a long time as well.
No, Xavier McKinney is going to be a screensaver for a while. There's nothing he can do to stop it.
And of all people for it to happen to, that guy is so physical. I just I can't believe it happened to him.
Well, he went in really, really high for that tackle.
Yeah.
And it cost him. Sean Shivers ducked his head and took him on head on. And all you can do is give him credit because it was a heck of a hit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So, you look at Alabama message boards, you look at Alabama Twitter, and there are some people out there, Luke, and you probably know this and have more examples than I do, but there are people that are genuinely upset with Coach Nick Saban. Is this the vocal minority? I'm assuming it is, right?
Oh, there's no question it's the vocal minority.
Right.
And look, there's nothing worse and nothing better than the internet and social media. It's the worst of us and the best of us.
Sure.
And the problem, it's sort of like Joseph Bulovas having to come out with an apology, which he didn't have to, which is just stupid because there is no universe in Marvel comics, DC comics, in the multiverses of anything where Joseph Bulovas makes that kick. He's either going to, he's just not. I'm jaded. We've missed 101 field goals since 2007. That is 8 more than anybody else in the entire country. Conversely, Anders Carlson was 4 of 11 from 40 and beyond coming into this game, and he goes 4 for 4.
Mm-hmm.
You can't explain things like that. That is just, as I said earlier, playing in Jordan Hare will either make you come to Jesus or it will make you lose all your religion. It just depends on which side of the coin you're on.
Sure.
And when it comes to social media and people saying Nick Saban doesn't know what he's doing, those people are just really upset, and they can't accept, their ego will not let them accept the fact that Alabama lost a game. They've got to find a culprit. They've got to find somebody to blame. There is nobody to blame. Auburn won the game. End of story. As far as that 1 second thing goes, look, it is essentially a 4th timeout that Auburn got and was allowed to set up. But that's a loophole in the rules, just like there are loopholes in tax law, and people take advantage of them, and they will, I bet, this summer make a rule where, okay, if we do determine there's 1 second left, you can't just let the other team come out there and set up for a field goal as if they got a timeout, which is essentially what happened. But because it's not in the rules right now, I don't blame Auburn one bit for taking advantage of it. And if it had been the other way around, I would have been cheering Nick Saban on.
What is the average Alabama fan's feelings about the penalty that decided the game at the end, the 12 men on the field, the illegal substitution?
I'm not learned enough to know the rules as much that it's the 100% correct call. By the letter of the law, it probably is right. I will say, though, that to me, it's kind of like when you watch there was a play earlier in the game where Auburn should have gotten a delay a game, I think, and they let it snap just a hair after the zeros, and some people around me were going nuts. And I was like, look, it was close enough. Just let it go. And I feel like if you're trying to get off the field and the ball hadn't been snapped, you let it go. But by the letter of the law, I think it's right. And I understand what Saban was saying. I wish he hadn't said unfair. Sometimes Saban says some things that certainly I don't agree with. I think he's the best coach that ever, walked the football field, but that doesn't mean he's immune from making mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of folks are pointing at him saying, like he doesn't handle losses well. But I mean, who's been great at their profession that has handled losses or shortcomings well? So I mean, I don't think that is I don't think that's an argument against him.
There was a famous quote, you show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of true with Saban too. And here's the other thing. I mean, I don't mean this in a cocky way, but he doesn't have a lot of experience losing. I mean,
it doesn't happen
I don't
very
blame
often.
him for not knowing.
Sure. What is the Alabama's fan base opinion of Gus Malzahn?
I think as long as we're not playing him in Jordan Hare, we love him. I'm convinced. I get to a point with every coach or every player or everything where I'm like, okay, we have enough sample size. I think we have enough sample size to know now what Gus Malzahn is, and his ceiling is roughly 10-3, and his floor is roughly 7-5. And I think that's what it's always going to be. Now, if people are going to always point to 2013. I will consider that the outlier. I mean, there was the kick six, the miracle on Jordan Hare, the comeback against Mississippi State. I mean, everything happened to bounce Auburn's way that year except for the final 13 seconds of the national championship. And then there was another year in there, maybe 16 or 15, I can't remember exactly, where he lost more than normally and got fewer breaks than normal. And I would consider that the outlier. Yeah. Overall, I think Gus Malzahn's a 9-4, 8-4 kind of guy. And I think that's what he will continue to be. But this is, you get in a trap with coaches like this, just like Alabama has in the past, especially in basketball, where they win just enough that you're like, I can't really justify firing him and paying him a bunch of money. And we could get worse, but if we want to grow, we're going to have to do something different. And I don't know that Gus is going to be able to really change his stripes to truly grow and have like a 14-1, 15-0 type season. I just don't think that's going to be a Gus Malzahn thing.
Looking forward for Alabama, going into whichever, it certainly looks like they'll still be in a New Year's Six game. Going into that game, are there any kind of whispers or concerns that a lot of these very talented players, especially on offense, are going to not play in the bowl game? Because it looks like we could see, maybe the first situation where it's not one guy or two guys who aren't playing, it's like 6 or 7.
No, and that is it's not really a fear, because I think now we all understand it. It makes a lot of sense. For the two of you and me, if somebody said, hey, you can go out there and play your final bowl game, I mean, we'd strap it on right now and go out there because it means that much to us. But at the same time, we know we're not going pro and costing ourselves potentially millions of dollars. So I would be shocked if Najee Harris plays in the bowl game. I'd be shocked if, say, Terrell Lewis plays in the bowl game. Now, some of the other guys that are on the fence, and I would say Alabama's got about 10 juniors that have the potential to come out. And if you had asked me 3 or 4 days ago, I would have said, I bet all of them come out. Just based on a little bit of trickle-down information that I've gotten, I feel like okay, maybe 5 or 6 of them come out and maybe some more come back. And if Alabama can just so much as get, and I'm just throwing these names out there, if they can get a Devontae Smith back to go with Jalen Waddle next year, if they can get a Henry Ruggs and a Devontae Smith back, and Lord knows if Tua comes back, and then Dylan Moses, who I'm beginning to believe is going to come back because his knee injury was so severe. All of a sudden, Alabama goes from the dynasty is dead to, hey, they're probably preseason number 1 again.
Yeah, that definitely could be true. And if kind of disaster strikes for this Alabama team and the 3 wide receivers don't play in the bowl game, I believe there's an offensive lineman or 2 for Alabama that are projected as first rounders. They don't play in the bowl game, and we kind of see a lot of these guys not play. Alabama doesn't perform well in the bowl game. They end up 10-3 on the season. Is that going to be, an incredibly disappointing kind of disaster-like season in Tuscaloosa?
I think I would classify it a disaster if Alabama hadn't had the injuries in the schedule and the record had wound up that way. With the injuries, I think for the most part, rational Alabama fans, and they're few and far between, I understand, would deal with the fact that, okay, we had a lot of things go against us, and it didn't work out, and we'll regroup. I mean, the last time Alabama went 10-3 was 2010, and they went to win back-to-back national championships and had a shot at a third until the kick 6 happened. So I feel like it's going to be okay, but yeah, there'll be some people that will certainly take it that hard because they live and die by this sport, and they don't have a lot of perspective when it comes to some other things that led to losses. They don't want to hear that. They just want to look at the W's and the L's. But back to the bowl game just for a second. My nightmare is for Alabama to end up in the Cotton Bowl and play Memphis or Boise State and have, anywhere from 8 to 10 juniors sit out, and Memphis or Boise have nobody sit out because they might not have a lot of draftable players, and they come out with their hair on fire and beat Alabama's brains in, which will, again, just start up the narrative that you guys know about when Central Florida beat Auburn, that, these group of 5 teams deserve a chance, when it's really not apples to apples. And that's my fear. I'm hoping Alabama ends up, frankly, in the Citrus Bowl to play Michigan, because I think that's an intriguing matchup, and it would be a lot of fun to see Harbaugh and Saban and who can get the maddest the quickest, I guess.
Sure. Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama joining us. Thank you so much for your time this morning, man. Appreciate hearing things kind of from the other side of the rivalry, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. And again, I want to be triply clear, because I know Alabama fans can certainly look in the excuse book from time to time. All fans can, but I think Alabama fans get a bad rep for it. Auburn just won that game. And I'm not blaming anything on the officials. I'm not blaming a thing on injuries. Look, Alabama had their chances. Even with that second put back on the clock, that happened at the end of the first half.
Yeah.
There were all these other things that make up the game. And you've got to overcome obstacles that come in your way. And Alabama did not do it, and Auburn did, and I can't do anything but give them credit.
Absolutely. Luke, thanks so much, man.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good day.
Well, we'll have more stuff for you tomorrow. Be sure to call the hotline or send us emails at lockedonauburn@gmail.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Zach Blackerby, Michael Pappas here with you. This has been another edition of the Locked On Auburn podcast.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.